I wish I could take it all back. I honestly do. I honestly do wish I could take it all back. And not just because I'm stranded in space.
Hello and welcome back to Factorio Space Age. We beat the game last time, but we did it with bases that were, let's say, a bit slapdash. The more I sat on it, the more I wanted to come back and turn these into bases that I could actually be proud of. So join me on a journey of radical self-improvement, hopefully minus any Canadian pseudo-intellectuals with amateur comprehension of lobster biology. Most of this journey will be the kind of engineering design challenges that I really love about Factorio, but we do have a few chores to take care of first. So before we forget, let's start by dragging the game-winning ship back from the solar system edge. We still need to pause thrust every so often so it doesn't ram itself into dust, but once it's halfway there, we can just let it drift the rest of the way back at a cool 10 kilometers per second, while we do more important things. And more important things will start with Vulcanus. We'll need some materials from here to begin fixing ourselves up elsewhere, so we might as well deal with the obvious pain points while we're at it. Last time we were supplementing the solar with ordinary steam engines. That wasn't a power limitation per se, but putting 500 degree steam through steam engines just feels wrong. Since we've been to Gleba and unlocked heating towers, however, now we can replace our steam engines with turbines. Over 3 times the power for the same amount of steam. The other glaring issue here was coal liquefaction. When last we checked, we were still using the new but dreadfully inefficient simple liquefaction recipe. So to no one's great surprise, our biggest bottleneck here was oil products. Relieving that bottleneck will require setting up regular liquefaction. That still requires some heavy oil to seed the process, so we'll barrel some before tearing this down. I'm not aiming for a perfect liquefaction build here, just a functional one. Or at least that's what I'm telling myself to justify routing the cracking plant pipes like this. Don't worry, we'll rip this up and redo it with a proper build later this video. Right now I just want more oil for less coal. By the way, here's a cool new feature. You can now enable or disable crafting machines by hooking them up directly to the circuit network. No more pumps for cracking control. Now we need to start exporting Vulcanus tech for more than just science. Foundries are a given for the productivity bonus. Big miners have a similar bonus, but that one scales with quality, so we'll get to those later. The other important early exports are calcite for cliff explosives and tungsten plate for artillery shells, and there's 2 places that could use the latter. I was planning on starting with Novice, but it's been getting increasingly hard to ignore the alerts cropping up from Gleba, so we'll tackle that first. And here we are on Fulgora. That's not just a gag, we really do need a Fulgora product for proper Gleba defense, the Tesla turret. We have some on Gleba already, but we could use some more because have you seen our Gleba defenses? Yuck. Instead of this haphazard mess, let's try building mostly symmetrical defenses that leave the full internal area available to farming. Rocket turrets at the corners can share requester chests, and Tesla turrets next to them leaves the center space open for roboports and a few lasers. Then we round it out with some redundant power poles. Copy-paste to all 4 sides, and we have a shiny new defense perimeter. And you know what? Let's set the lasers to prioritize wrigglers while we're at it. No sense letting them waste their energy on 80% resistant stompers if there's something better for them to do. But we can take it a step further and prevent most attacks from occurring in the first place. As any longtime Factorio player knows, an artillery shell a day keeps the biters away, and the same is true of pentapods. The new shell recipe requires a decent chunk of tungsten plate and a sprinkling of calcite, so we'll need to ship some ingredients from Vulcanus. Unfortunately, the shell damage isn't enough to take down a moderately evolved pentapod egg raft in one shot. You can increase artillery damage with new infinite research, but Looks to be holding steady. Let's tackle Novice while this runs.
Moments later.
Never mind, spoke too soon. I happened to check a damage alert, and it turns out that pentapod eggs are backing up on the science line. A quick glance around reveals a nearly dead base, which wildly enough is due to not enough spoilage in the system, which is keeping us from making enough new nutrients to restart the dead bioflux builds. I did cache some bioflux, however, so we can set up a requester chest to move some of it back to the start of the line and restart it that way. Okay, enough distractions. Looking at Novice again, we need to clear a pretty large area of biters to secure the new oil patch. Even if I did feel like shipping in enough tungsten plate, I definitely don't feel like crawling the border forward to compensate for lack of range. I'd much rather clear it and set up the new border once and only once. So instead of using artillery, let's do it with Spidertrons. They also have a new recipe, basically just a reactor-powered rocket turret on legs. Fair enough. They still need a fish to drive them, obviously, but since fish spoil now, we'll be sure to get those last.
Have a look at this little beauty, isn't she cute?
Next, they need ammo. You can arm them with personal laser equipment, but nests have massively increased laser resistance now, specifically to counter that kind of spam. Thankfully, rockets are cheap, and we've already researched a bunch of explosive damage upgrades for the space platforms, so these should do nicely. The new Spidertron remote is a godsend. Gone are the days of setting up a spider conga line and getting the slow ones caught on lake edges. Instead, you can just click and drag to select a whole group, and they'll each follow parallel paths. The sounds of victory. It's about here that I realize I forgot to give them personal roboports with bots and repair packs so they could repair themselves in the field. But they're clearly not taking that much damage, so let's just not worry about that for now. Spitters and worms fire their acid where you're going, not where you are, so by frequently changing where you're going with this sort of zigzag pattern, Spidertrons can get pretty close to nests and still manage to dodge most incoming damage. Alright, looks like we're clear. Let's set up the new oil field and some border walls before the biters re-expand back into this territory. Yeah, like that. Okay, what else could use some attention? Well, I've been meaning to upgrade my holmium plate production to use foundries for that sweet productivity bonus, so let's head to Fulgora. I totally remembered to record the maybe 2 minutes where I was actually shuffling things around, so here's what it looks like once it's done. I also totally remembered to reconnect the holmium solution pipe to the electrolyte plants before production ground to a halt a couple hours later. I was about to set up cliff explosives here before I remembered we'd need coal, and there's no way to get that here natively. I mean, okay, I could make it in space and then drop it down, but who wants to do that when it's so much easier to just ship in the finished product? There's one other thing I want to do here, and that's to start making quality modules. We'll start off on the wrong foot by making quality tier 1s instead of jumping straight to tier 3s. We're making these in electromagnetic plants because you should definitely take advantage of the 50% productivity bonus for such expensive items. As with most upcycling builds, the output will get sent back to the input, where any quality module that's just not quality enough will be recycled into hopefully higher quality components for higher quality modules. Then we copy-paste for quality module 2s and quality module 3s. I think I'm getting some semantic satiation. Quality doesn't sound like a word anymore. Quality. Ugh. Okay, maybe the extra productivity on the holmium plate wasn't actually a good idea, because now we're starting to get clogged on holmium ore, and we kind of need that to keep flowing if we're going to get circuits for all these modules. I get so desperate for green circuits that I make this terrible life decision. Then I get a much better idea. Why not just move this entire process onto Vulcanus? That might sound really stupid considering the superconductors we need for tier 3 quality modules are native to Fulgora, and all the circuits are practically free. But I really don't feel like running around and solving throughput issues on a base that's getting deleted soon. Meanwhile, on Vulcanus, the circuits are even more free, barring the coal needed for plastic, but we're being much more efficient with that now thanks to our new liquefaction build. And now that we can ship in EM plants from Fulgora too, every tier of circuit can be 50% more free. They're so free that I decide not to upgrade the green circuit build just yet, because for now we clearly have enough. This is when I finally realized I only needed to make quality tier 1 and 2s, not quality tier 1 and 2s. Recycling returns average out to perfect production ratios, so all I'd really be doing by making quality base tiers is adding unnecessary ingredients that I could only balance out again by additionally making quality circuits and quality superconductors. When you're first upcycling to legendary quality modules, it's important to babysit the process at least a little bit, because replacing your lower quality modules with higher quality ones while they're being made will speed up the process of getting more. And you'll want speed because this process is slow. It's so slow that I have to take back what I said earlier about waiting to ship out big mining drills until I had legendary ones. That will clearly take several dozen hours, and there's just not much point to waiting that long when I can get most of the benefits right away. Upgrading miners will have to wait until I'm back on Novice, however, because my robot network doesn't extend that far out. What I can do remotely is upgrade the circuit builds. As with the liquefaction build on Vulcanus, these won't be the final incarnations. They're just here to take advantage of productivity bonuses to ease resource consumption in the interim. I build a full 10-plant version of the blue circuit build before checking the crafting speed calculations and noticing that each one of these can eat 4 green circuits per second. That's way too much for a single red lane to carry without stacking, so I just delete the last 6 plants. Then it occurs to me that I also should have checked the green circuit build, and it turns out this is also twice as big as it needs to be. Half of what I built here can keep up with both of the previous assembler-based circuit builds. I love electromagnetic plants. Going forward from here will benefit from a more robust interplanetary logistics system than I've built so far, so this seems like a good opportunity to design a new interplanet cargo hauler. We're going to make 6 of these things, 1 for each pair of inner planets, so each route between planets will get a hauler dedicated to that route. After some mucking around with thruster configurations that I won't bore you with because it didn't go anywhere, I decide to scrap that approach and start with power instead. We're using fission power here because all 6 haulers will share the same design, and most of them can't count on sufficient solar over their entire routes. Maximizing speed requires minimizing weight and thus footprint, so we'll want to insert and remove fuel cells directly from the hub. We'll also want to take advantage of our tanks for fluid routing wherever possible, rather than running extra pipes. We can fit a few solar and accumulators on either side of the reactor. It makes the total width even, and we need a little solar to kickstart this anyway. Next, we'll fit our fuel tanks vertically in the space above the innermost thruster, and our oxidizer tanks in line with the piping we need to connect the thrusters. Then the fuel plant can fit right next to the tanks. 1 pipe on each side is all it takes to route water in and fuel out. In fact, we can compress this a bit further by switching the solar and accumulators to free up 1 tile of space and moving the fuel tanks inward. Then the oxidizer plant can fit right next to the fuel plant. Oxidizer out can reach the thruster piping with a single underground pair, and water in can reach the plant with another underground pair, with room for inserters between. Meanwhile, the ice melting plant will get tacked directly onto the water tanks. As with my previous ship designs, this will use an A-frame configuration, though I guess with the cargo bays out the back it'll look more like a mouse cursor? Anyway, both sides of the ship get a dedicated sushi belt that takes large diagonal steps along the perimeter, and each side is responsible for its own resource management. For some reason I've never seen explained or justified, one of the factors in ship speed calculation is ship width. The wider the ship, the slower it goes. So to maximize speed, you want thrusters extending the entire width of the ship. The only exception for this design is the cargo bays sticking out the back, and that's just so we can expand cargo capacity if necessary. Width is relevant here because this grabber would extend past the thrusters, and we want the thrusters to define the maximum width of the ship. So we counteract the grabber's extra width by simply adding another thruster. Then by moving the grabber down slightly, we can create enough room for a double layer of turrets and lasers. Laser damage research at level 11 allows lasers to one-shot the smallest tier of asteroids, so splitting the work between turret types should ease off the ammo demand. Then let's shove a couple ammo assemblers in this space here. Obviously, we'll be using foundries to make iron plates for the ammo. We don't need the extra productivity bonus for an inner planet hauler, but I want the extra bonus. Finally, our crushers will go in this space above the foundries. We do need an extra crusher for advanced oxide processing, since we need the calcite it makes both for the foundries and for the advanced fuel and oxidizer recipes. But we don't want to rely just on the advanced oxide processing, since it produces much less ice and will also need plenty of that for water for the reactor. Next, we'll need to be smart about not letting the grabbers just dump whatever they find onto the belt. By using a few decider combinators, we can dynamically set the grabber filters to only grab what we don't have enough of on the belt. Then we set similar circuit conditions on our crushers, our foundries, and our ammo production. The goal with all of them is to not clog the sushi belt with any particular product. Now we temporarily delete the thrusters since we can't flip those, and the other half of the ship is just a couple copy-pastes away. Can't forget to set target priorities on our turrets. Since we've already popped our overkill cherry with foundries, let's add some reprocessing crushers so we're never starved of any particular asteroid type. Unfortunately, that lengthens the frontmost segment more than I'd like, plus it leaves this ugly gap. I can fill that gap with turrets or accumulators, but neither is ideal. Then I get a brilliant idea. We can make some space by cutting our turbine capacity in half, moving the foundries down, and direct inserting from the plate foundries into the ammo assemblers. 23 megawatts should still be enough, right? Extend the belt a bit and the 3 new crushers can fit in the new space. Then we just trim the fat up front and fill the remaining space with solar and accumulators, and we're ready for a test run. Well, it's nice and speedy, 273 kilometers per second at its peak, but the power cuts out whenever the lasers fire, and that still isn't enough to keep it from taking a bit of damage. The turrets also don't cover enough area to prevent the occasional asteroid from crashing into our cargo bays, but that's nothing a few repair packs on board can't solve. Tier 3 efficiency modules take spoilage in space age, but we have plenty of that on hand here on Novice from Lime Science that's gone bad. I have 3,000 some hours logged in this game, but before just now I have literally never placed an efficiency module. Listen, MEGABASE habits die hard, alright? The school I come from says that if you're having power problems, the solution is to build more power, but we don't have much choice for this particular space platform design. We can also make some smaller tweaks to squeeze out more power, like strategically replacing green inserters with blue ones. But there's another problem besides power, and it's one that I'm not sure we can actually solve. Gun turrets shoot medium asteroids, which break apart into small asteroids that the lasers clean up. But because gun turrets have a relatively short range compared to lasers, and because the lasers' target priorities mean they don't track medium asteroids, the lasers don't wake up and turn to face the small variants until they're basically already right on top of them. Meaning it's not just power that they're lacking, it's also speed. Well, now that we have some efficiency modules installed, let's make another test run to Vulcanus to pick up a couple speed modules. It looks like the efficiencies are helping, but not quite enough. Another test run and we lose a laser turret. Yeah, okay, this isn't stable. Guess we'll have to bite the bullet and switch to just using bullets. Alright, this is looking much better. Now we just need 5 more of them. While we wait, let's check in on our bases. Fulgora is dead because it's clogged on gears. This is exactly why I didn't want to make quality modules here. But over on Vulcanus, our quality modules are finally all qualitied. Let's take the opportunity to head back to Novice and upgrade our miners. We'll also start setting up artificial soil manufacturing on Gleba. This lets you extend the plantable areas and make the most of your farm fields. We'll bring in the seeds and nutrients it needs with bots, but we'll be sure to put a circuit condition on the seed requester chest so it only asks for seeds if we have extra in the logistics network. Alright, Gleba appears to be in good shape. Surely I have made no mistakes here.
Soon after.
I have made mistakes here. How is there over 200,000 spoilage in the logistics system? A glance around reveals the artificial soil production as the culprit. It requires tons of nutrients to make, which wouldn't be a problem if we were actually making any, but we've run out of landfill with which to make it, so hundreds of nutrients a minute are being fed to requester chests only to languish and rot. Okay, I think we can still do this with bots, but we'll need to be smarter about how we request our ingredients. Seeds can get a dedicated requester chest that only enables when there's excess seeds in the system, but nutrients and landfill get a separate chest that only enables when there's sufficient landfill in the system. Actually, that's still not enough, because we could also clog up on artificial soil, which would cause the same problem. So we need 3 chests. 1 chest for seeds, 1 chest for landfill only when we have room to make more artificial soil, and 1 chest for nutrients only when we have landfill in the second chest. That should turn off nutrient requests both if artificial soil fills up or if landfill runs out. Okay, this finally looks like it's working now.
11 minutes later.
I really should know better than to jinx myself like that. The global alert I set up for Gleba's rocket fuel supply dying just went off because it's still clogged on spoilage. Thankfully, I'm already here, and it's easy enough to manually unclog. We're clearly not consuming spoilage quickly enough, so let's replace this sad excuse for a spoilage buffer design with one that's actually tried and true. Looks like all our haulers are built. Now to add 1 billion circuit conditions to each of their schedules. And because you can't take an existing stop and modify which planet it goes to, they all need to be done individually. Hooray. The Fulgora Gleba and Gleba Vulcanus haulers won't cross paths with Novice by default, so they get an interrupt for refueling. But the Fulgora Vulcanus hauler has to pass by Novice anyway, so we just add that to the schedule. Then we simply need to decide what to send where. Add the same logistic groups to the respective planetary landing pads and watch the magic happen. Some of you may have been wondering why I didn't speed beacon the quality module production on Vulcanus, and that's because speed modules decrease quality. But you know what kind of speed doesn't decrease quality? Inherent machine crafting speed. So there is a way to speed up quality module production, and that's by upgrading to legendary electromagnetic plants, which go from crafting speed 2 to 5. So let's celebrate our shiny new logistics system by sending 24 legendary quality modules to Fulgora and get a head start on making those. While we're getting head starts, let's finally make some turbo belts. A wise YouTuber once said that if you're not using concrete and lamps, it's not a real base. But I'd add that a real base should also use the fastest belts available, whether it needs them or not. Then I get a warning that one of our borders on Novice is out of repair packs, which I have no choice but to fix in person. Oh, Okay, you know how lasers were killing our reactors on the cargo haulers? Turns out I hadn't actually completed Laser 11 research yet. So they had to 2-shot every small asteroid, meaning they were drawing twice as much power as necessary. I don't think that would have solved the speed problem, but now I'm tempted to go back and retry the laser design. And I'm extra tempted now that the haulers are starting to throw out of ammo warnings. They're clearly not bad enough to actually result in damage, but that doesn't stop them from being annoying. You know what? Yeah, let's take another crack at this. Since laser turrets outrange gun turrets, let's try to solve the speed problem by placing the gun turrets in front of the lasers, so they have extra time to break up the medium asteroids. It makes the silhouette look a little jagged, but hey, form follows function. Let's take a test run and... wait. Okay, yes, we have definitely researched Laser 11 now. Still a few out of power flashes, but they seem fewer and farther between, I think. Whatever, at least that doesn't throw global alerts. We do have to be careful about those deleted gun turrets. The ammo inside them goes back to the hub, which throws off the ammo circuit condition on the schedule, so we have to send our extra ammo back to Novice. I have to manually change each of the other haulers because just pasting the blueprint over them would also paste schedule and logistic data, and I do not want to redo that. A couple more test runs later and we're still taking a bit of damage. What to do about this?
The answer? Use a gun. And if that don't work, use more gun.
Let's see if that does it. Okay, we have one more chore to take care of before starting to design our real base, and that's foundation. We need this stuff to be able to build anything more complicated than elevated rail through the lava patches of Vulcanus or the oil oceans of Fulgora, and we'll want to do plenty of both. Unfortunately, late game doesn't begin to describe this tech. Just look at that recipe. Even aside from the Aquilo-specific resources, this thing demands that we ship mountains of tungsten plate, carbon fiber, and stone of all things, just to make one tile. Or at least that's the stupid way of making it. Yeah, eventually I wisen up and realize that it's way more rocket efficient to ship lithium and barreled cold fluoroketone over to Vulcanus and just make foundation there, even considering the extra rockets off Aquilo and the having to ship back empty barrels. Something still feels wrong to me about sending barreled liquids through space, but I can't argue with the math. Alright. If you've made it this far, thank you for your patience. It is now finally time to design our real bases. 45 science per minute can beat the game, but it's not anything I'd want to show off, you know? Although I guess I already have. Anyway, why don't we target one unstacked green belt's worth? 60 science per second sounds like a nice achievable target, he said in his hubris. Let's start by designing the rail network that will serve as the beating heart of our bases. We'll make it a left-hand drive system so signals are placed between tracks, and 6 tiles apart so roboports can fit between signals or ramps. The general approach to this train network will be a riff on a megabase I built in 1.1, where 3-way intersections are used as the corners of variable-length rail blocks. Train stations are then set up as parallel branches off the main line, and each individual wagon will typically feed a dedicated production row. But this is space age. We can't just not use elevated rails. Some fiddling around gradually reveals a means of removing the intersection parts of the intersection by using ramps to jump over crossing paths, resulting in the same arrangement but accomplished with only splits and merges. Then we can run a substation-based power network straight through the interior and a robot network between pairs of substations. There. That looks like a nice block bookend, don't you think? The introduction of ramps along the inner edges of the block complicates things, however, because train stations no longer have a guaranteed place to branch directly off the main line. So I tried a solution called not doing that. The interior of the block will instead be comprised of a ground-level ring of rail. Stations hook up to the ring instead of the main line, and trains can enter and exit the ring at whatever free locations there happen to be, instead of having specific entrance and exit points tied directly to their stations. Then I spent the next hour and a half mucking around with signals. To be clear, it doesn't take that long just to signal an elevated 3-way intersection. What takes that long is trying different permutations of intersections, extensions, and ring branches, and signaling all of them in a way that consistently provides maximum throughput, regardless of the particular arrangement. Did I need to be that much of a perfectionist? Absolutely not. But there's a reason I'm using the robot Mo from WALL-E as my profile picture. Might as well cap it off by adding signal wires to the substations, just in case we ever want to set up global item monitoring. You can access a global circuit network in 2.0 by hooking into a radar, but that would also mean placing unnecessary radars throughout the base. We don't strictly need them for visibility anymore, because roboports also include that capability now. And what train base would be complete without concrete? The block interiors will just get plain refined concrete, because the builds themselves should stand out there. But I'm in a decorative mood, so we'll put all sorts of flourishes around the tracks. I won't talk you through it all, as you can clearly see it for yourself, but I think it looks darn pretty. Let's start designing an actual novice block with probably the most difficult one, the bot mall. How hard could that be, you might wonder? Well, there's a fair bit of support infrastructure that I'm going to try to cram into a very tight space. For starters, I've decided that instead of shipping raw ores or plates around, I'm going to bring in calcite from Vulcanus so we can ship molten iron and copper everywhere, and use foundries to cast it to whatever we need, wherever we need it. For mall purposes, that means we'll have to cast our molten metals into several different products right by their unload stations, then dump those products into inline passive provider chests for bot access. We'll try to arrange these foundries so the most requested materials are closest to the actual mall to help minimize bot travel time. Now let's get a sense of what kind of scale we want by selecting every single recipe we want to craft. I consider making personal equipment here, but ultimately decide against it. Personal equipment are good early targets for legendary quality farming, and that's not a job for bots alone. It's about here that I remember the foundry's concrete recipe needs more than just molten metal, so half these tanks have to go to make room for a water pipe. They also take bricks, which I initially set up with nice easy requester chests. Then I remembered I'm planning on putting all the other ingredients on the other side of the block, so the bots would have to carry bricks across the entire mall. So the only sensible thing to do here is to move the foundry stops rightward to make room for the brick stop on this side. This is as good a time as any to show off what the belt-based unloading system will look like. We're using bulk inserters to take items from the train so they can always fully empty their hands, followed by stack inserters taking items from the intermediate chests to maximize item capacity on the belts. Those belts use 2 side loads and a filter splitter to join the output of 4 inserters into a fully compressed belt. Since this is still a bot mall, the intermediate chests for this stop will be passive provider chests rather than steel chests, so bots can still access their contents. Then each wagon's belt is routed across the rail to the input of their respective neighboring foundries. We could use one other improvement here, and that's to make refined concrete directly next to the regular concrete. There are only a dozen mall items we want to make with EM plants on Novice, and the 4x4 footprint of an EM plant would throw off the otherwise 3x3 assembler rows. So instead, we'll arrange the plants vertically right by the foundries. Then we rearrange the assemblers and tweak the recipes a bit so we can make 6 rows of equal length. Since our current base has electric engines on the bus, I debated making them in their own block and bringing them in by train, but I scrapped that idea when I remembered the mall also needs regular engines, and it would feel wrong either to train in regular engines or to make them here and then train in one of their major products. So instead I cap off each row with 1 engine assembler and 1 electric engine assembler. I'm deliberately leaving a large gap here for quality builds. We'll eventually want quality of many products, but I have little idea which ones, so I think it makes more sense to allow myself room to make bespoke quality builds that I can swap out as needs change. We'll fill part of that gap with rocket silos so we can easily export whatever we need. Then a few rows of unfiltered storage chests for random item storage needs. Now to add the non-foundry unload stops on the other side of the mall. The vast majority of stone usage would go towards landfill, so I build some landfill production directly into the stop. Alright, time to suck it up and tackle the tedious part, setting up the chests and inserters for every single machine. I'm using filtered storage chests rather than passive provider chests here, so bots will typically return unused items back to their source chest and keep things tidy. I'm also restricting item quantities via inserters using logistic network contents rather than circuit conditions, so items that do find their way elsewhere still count towards the total. It makes for an extremely clean mall, but it's also an absolute pain to set up. Then I sprinkle a few laser turrets around where biter eggs would go. Those chests could use more thorough circuit control like the artificial soil production on Gleba, but I'm having trouble caring right now, so we'll come back to it in a minute. In the meantime, let's switch gears and tackle a green circuit block. Late-game green circuit builds are pretty notorious for just how much copper wire they demand, so rather than trying to belt literally anything here, we're going to make this a pure direct insertion build. We'll also use productivity module 2s rather than 3s because 3s require biter eggs now, and I don't feel like dealing with biter eggs any more than I absolutely have to. The general aesthetic I'd like to follow where possible is to sprinkle small numbers of beacons between builds. 2.0 introduced a new logarithmic beacon effectiveness curve that massively buffed builds with small numbers of beacons, so I'm curious to see how much mileage we can get out of that. I'm also curious to try out more reverse trains. These blocks are on the shorter side, so using a 4-1 reverse train system means we can park the maximum of 4 wagons on the straightaways of our stops, while the locomotives can park on the curves. At this point, I needed to decide whether to fill those trains with rocket fuel or nuclear fuel. But then I ended up pacing my room for over an hour because that spawned a flurry of new questions, like how I wanted to fuel the trains in the first place, how to get rocket fuel to the rockets, whether I wanted to ship U-235 to other planets, how extensively I wanted these blocks to be shareable between planets, and what should come after the impending collapse of the American democratic experiment. The answers I arrived at in no particular order are somewhat, bots, might as well, a hybrid of sortition and a semi-independent administrative state, and a dedicated rocket fuel to rocket train. Said train might sound a bit silly considering it would run strictly from one point to one other point, but it's less silly when you consider the only real alternatives are either to mass transport rocket fuel across blocks via bot, or to tack the rockets and maybe the entire bot mall onto an oil block. There's not quite enough room to fit one more stop in the bot mall, however, so I free up some space by deleting 4 passive provider chests per wagon so I can move the roboports adjacent to the tracks. That frees up enough space that I also have room to clear the rocket silos out of the quality area, instead fitting them vertically by the train stops with beacons between. And okay, since we're here again, let's sanitize our biter egg inputs. As with the artificial soil on Gleba, we'll handle it by first disabling the chest that requests everything except biter eggs if we have enough of the end product. But since we have multiple other ingredients to track here, we have to signal their combined presence with a combinator. Thankfully, the new decider combinator's ability to operate on multiple incoming signals makes this a snap. Just verify that all other ingredients are present in their requested quantities and output the biter egg request to the second chest. Also, I forgot to record myself actually doing it, but at some point I realized the foundries would be a ridiculous production bottleneck, so I shuffled these tanks around until I could fit in some beacons. Okay, that's a bot mall and green circuits down. Let's tackle red circuits next. At first, I try this oddball belt braiding so all 3 input ingredients could be routed on one side and fed in via stack inserter. It does work, but it's pretty ugly, and the power routing doesn't make it look any better. So I relent and send a single plastic and green circuit combination input belt down the middle. I still want to use stack inserters wherever it's practical, and here we can accomplish that by sending the copper wire down the near lane thanks to a belt turn, and putting the red circuit output on the far lane. One medium power pole between EM plants looks much better than that substation arrangement. Since both pairs of production rows will use a combination input belt, we need to join the output of 2 train wagons into one belt. We can accomplish that using the same unload pattern, just split across 2 wagons. The venerable Kirk McDonald calculator reports that hitting my science target will require about 243 red circuits per second, not including any for the mall. We're just under a third of that here, but avoiding a fourth block isn't as simple as just extending the build slightly, because the foundries need more speed to keep up. But after some trial and error, we make it work. The blue circuit design is nearly the same pattern. 2 rows of EM plants, a few beacons and an output belt down the middle, tons of green circuits down the sides, a few red circuits brought in with long-handed inserters from farther out. You get the idea. The unique feature here is at the block level, our first encounter with what I'm calling chained unload stations. Because blue circuits are so hungry for green circuits, feeding this build with a single green circuit train would demand a new train every minute and 42 seconds. I'm not even sure if a train could make the full load and unload round trip in that time. So instead, we're going to split the work between multiple unload stations. Thanks to the magic of priority input splitters, each station will use the previous one as backup, which should guarantee a steady supply of circuits even if one train is late for any reason. Plastic's petroleum demand is high enough that we need to make chained fluid unload stations too. These are a bit trickier because we can't let fluid from one station backfill to another station, trip a circuit condition, and disable it. So we're using pumps to separate each station into 2 stages. A first stage dedicated to each stop that we can circuit monitor, pumping into a second stage that's joined to all other second stages. Besides that, it's pretty straightforward. Coal input and beacons down the middle, petroleum input and plastic output down the sides. Because plastic produces in such high volumes, we'll also make 2 load stations here. Chaining these is as simple as 1 splitter and 1 underground pair per wagon. Alright, how much plastic does this make? Good, well over our target and... wait, 372 megawatts. That has to be a mistake. Let's do a quick sanity check on blue circuit. 576 megawatts. Well, green circuits barely use any beacons, surely that's better. 824 megawatts, and we need 3 blocks of those. Red circuits? Yeah, so the line in the calculator that I wasn't paying attention to was the last one, which estimates a total power draw of roughly 15 gigawatts. I really shouldn't be surprised, considering I'm aiming for 3,600 science per minute. That's solidly in MEGABASE territory, and MEGABASEs need mega power. I honestly didn't mean to do this. I picked a science target on a whim, and now a MEGABASE is falling out. I'm like Hidetaka Miyazaki and Poison Swamps. I just can't help myself. I don't want to pave the entire world with solar if I can avoid it, so instead I spend over an hour trying to design an infinitely tileable reactor that could fit between horizontal rail extensions. Unfortunately, there isn't quite enough room to put a sufficient number of heat exchangers on both sides of the reactors, at least without dipping into quality. But putting them only on one side results in a failure to reach the 500-degree operational threshold on a handful of exchangers. Even though it should be theoretically possible, in practice it just didn't work quite right. So instead, I switched to a monolithic design. A 2x12 reactor arrangement can perfectly span the gap between rail extensions, and 4 groups of 92 heat exchangers each can perfectly carry away the heat, with only 1 offshore pump needed per group thanks to the new steam expansion ratio. For extra aesthetic points, I decided to expand the substation network into the interior and build the turbine arrangement around the substations. That gives us 163 turbines per group, which covers our steam generation plus a bit extra. Then we can take advantage of that extra generation capacity and a bit of leftover space to add a few steam tanks, which gives us another 100 megawatts at peak. If I'm lucky, I'll only need 5 of these monsters. Now that we have that settled, the most complicated prerequisite product we're still missing is oil, which is always a unique struggle to route with beacons involved. Doubly so when you want to scale it up by making it tileable, like I do. After several false starts, I converge on the general idea of this compact, self-contained module with one of every major oil plant. The ratios are obviously wrong, but we can even them back out by arranging beacons around the build in such a way that different machines reach different speeds. We can easily tile it horizontally, and thanks to the new flippable fluid inputs, we can also mirror it vertically. Now, you may have noticed a lack of tanks in this design. We could connect every output to a small number of tanks at the end and run signal wires backwards, but what if we could monitor our fluid levels without any tanks at all? By connecting the refinery to the circuit network and setting its mode to read contents, we can see the output products as long as they remain in the refinery, which they will if there's no room for them to drain into a pipe. Then we can set the cracking plants to enable if there's ever more than one craft worth of their respective input product within the refinery. The result is that the heavy oil cracking will automatically turn on when heavy oil starts to back up, and the light oil cracking will do the same when light oil starts to back up. Voila! Cracking control with no pumps and no tanks. Light oil really just makes rocket fuel on Novice, so rather than make a totally separate block for it, we'll just feed light oil across the lubricant and petroleum load stations to the end of the block and make rocket fuel there. We'll need plenty of train throughput to carry away the nearly 4,000 petroleum per second this block will produce, so here's some chained fluid load stations. They're exactly like the chained fluid unload stations, except with the pumps facing the other way. Now to hook everything together. I hope I left enough room for this. The sulfur and acid combo block is easy enough. The only real trick is making the fluid routing clean. I've elected to do that by rotating the sulfur plants so petroleum can come in through the middle. It's kind of neat that you can make batteries from 3 fluid ingredients now, but that's about all that's interesting here, so let's move on. Low-density structures craft very slowly and absolutely devour copper, so we're not going to be able to get away with just sprinkling beacons this time around. Even with the level 5 productivity research I'm assuming we already have, this mass of 8 beaconed assemblers barely produces 7 per second, and we'll need closer to 60. The foundry casting recipe wouldn't help either, because that's actually less copper and iron efficient than the assembler recipe. It would save a bit of plastic, but we have plenty of that. However, thanks to stacking, the mountain of copper we need still only takes up 1 lane on a greenbelt, so we can get rid of this more complex dual underground setup and let the LDS output share a belt with the copper input. That's all the prerequisites out of the way. Time for science. One nice thing about not liking biter eggs and therefore using Tier 2 productivity modules is that you can make exactly 15 science per second. No more, no less. So 4 production rows will let us exactly hit our SPM target. Red science is still quite easy. 1 copper plate foundry, 1 gear foundry. Why don't we skip to something more interesting? I have to start green science by doing a lot of annoying math because the belt foundry produces way more belts per second than we need. As much as I love Rygaard's rate calculator mod, it doesn't compensate for over or under production. You still have to work out that part manually. And as with all manual processes, errors tend to creep in. In this case, I forgot that inserters also take iron plates. Fitting foundries into 8 beacon builds alongside assemblers essentially restricts you to only accessing one side of the foundry, which can make ingredient routing rather difficult. Thankfully, this one only needs a couple underground pairs to solve. I try messing around with speed modules directly in the plate foundries to help them keep up with the inserter assembler, but eventually I snap out of it and realize that it only takes 3 beacons plus the usual productivity modules to solve the problem. Black science is rare in vanilla megabases because it just isn't used for much. I mean, who really cares about infinite follower robot count research except to get that one achievement? But it has plenty of uses in Space Age, so we can't ignore it here. Thanks to belt stacking, we can make one shared coal and iron belt that carries sufficient material both for the grenades and the yellow ammo. We can output the grenades on the same side of the build using this dual underground pattern, but that only lets us output to one lane, and ideally I'd like the walls to output to the other lane. So I route the wall output backwards and around before entering the output underground path. Then we can follow the same pattern above to get red ammo out, followed by a quick and compact lane switch to let it share a belt with the science output. Time to put this design into a block. Can you spot the mistake? Yeah, I forgot that our smelting products are coming in liquid form. Since we'll need a decent number of beacons around these iron and copper foundries, they just won't fit in a 7-tile space. So I'm going to split this block into 2 sections. One section that converts the fluid prerequisites into their solid forms, and a second section that brings in the remaining ingredients and handles the actual science production. After having built basically the entire block, this is where I remember that steel is also coming in as a fluid. Thankfully, I don't need to throw out all this work. We just need one steel foundry tacked onto the end of the others that sideloads its output onto the copper belt. Blue science is mostly interesting because all of the engine prerequisite ingredients are made from molten iron, and all except pipes are made in foundries. Yes, you can make pipes in foundries too, but it's more resource efficient to cast the metal to plates and then assemble them into pipes. Anyway, I spend a bunch of time fiddling with beacons trying to make sure we're producing as much as we need of everything, but ideally not overproducing anything unnecessarily, and I end up with this dorky looking thing. It works, but I really wish I could make it look better. So I come back a few days later and make it look better. Shout out to the pipe output crossing to the other side of the row just to get it on the near lane. Purple science has a bit of a reputation among Factorio megabasers, and that's because of its extremely high ingredient demands. Just 15 purple science per second requires a deeply annoying 121 rails per second. That's already a lot, but it's also 1 rail per second more than a single stacked green lane can carry, which means we'll need to find some way to get some of these rails onto a second lane. We can accomplish that with this little belt twist, which sends the output of one rail assembler backwards and around to the near lane of an underground belt, while the other 3 rail assemblers can sideload their output onto the far lane. Then Purple Science itself can continue the dual underground pattern to take in modules and furnaces from the top belt and 2 lanes of rail from the bottom belt, while still having room to output onto a third belt. Because the foundries take up so much space, we need to put iron on one lane of an intermediate belt and then get the iron sticks they make to the other lane of that same belt, with much less room than usual to accomplish that lane switch. After plenty of trying, I realize I can take a page from Blue Science's pipe routing and output the sticks to the opposite side of the build, then cross back and dump them onto the near lane of the iron belt. At this point, I decide to break up the build like I did Black Science and make steel furnaces and modules in a separate section, because routing it all in one continuous build would be prohibitively difficult. Purple Science continues to earn its reputation. Even with foundry productivity bonuses, it still gorges on steel. We need no fewer than 7 steel casting foundries with 10 beacons apiece to support our furnaces and rails. And since foundries are, again, chonkers, the only place we have to route a circuit belt to the module and furnace area is by weaving it through the molten iron line. Isn't it odd how nobody really cares about weaving belts and pipes, even though that shouldn't be physically possible? But the moment you weave 2 different kinds of belts...
Well, then everyone loses their minds.
Okay, once again we have 2 neighboring products that need to end up on 2 different lanes of one belt, but this time the space demands are even more restrictive. How to accomplish it this time? In a particularly ingenious move, I use an inserter to move the modules from their belt back onto the same belt. Because inserters facing parallel belts always drop onto the right-hand side in the direction of travel, we can accomplish a lane switch in just 1 tile of space. Throughput of this technique is limited by inserter speed, so we can't use it everywhere, but in this case modules craft so slowly that it doesn't matter. Alright, time to put these all in a block. The first few stations will handle Section 1, making all the steel, modules, and furnaces. We'll make 3 chained molten iron unload stations just to be sure we always have enough steel. Then we send those outputs across 2 more stations. Stone merges into the empty lane of the steel belt, and a 4th molten iron station feeds our stick production. We're not even going to mess with the idea of a single section design for yellow science. Flying robot frames get their own section. Now, if it seems like I already know what I'm doing here, it's because I do. Fitting robot frame production into a 7-tile wide space is something I've done multiple times before, including in my Ribbon World video, and it basically follows the same belt pattern every time. The clever part is this filter splitter here. Since the engines and electric engines are both on the far lanes of their respective neighboring belts, a splitter filtered to engines actually swaps the two, while leaving the green circuits in the near lane entirely untouched. That lets us quickly and efficiently turn an electric engine ingredient belt into a robot frame ingredient belt. Next, we need to add the foundries for engine prerequisites. But unlike the mess that was Blue Science, we're making much fewer engines, which means we need much less prerequisite infrastructure. Now all we have to do is add stations for blue circuits and low-density structures, and Yellow Science is a piece of cake. Just 3 things in, 1 thing out. Now to consume the science. I thought this biolab design was terrific until I noticed that each lab would only consume a 1/4 pack per second, meaning we'd need 240 of these. So for the first and hopefully only time, I'm going to bump us up to legendary beacons and speed modules, which lets us just barely crack 1 science per second per lab. Or so I think. If you've been wondering why I'm not using legendary everything for this megabase, the answers are 1. Building up the resources we'd need would take forever and I have a video to finish, and 2. There's a point at which the challenge of scale simply stops being interesting to me. Like, here's all the legendary stuff you need to pump out 587 plastic per second, and that's before any productivity research. It's cool that you can do so much with so little, but making this wasn't exactly what I would call difficult. The difficulty instead is about how to force feed 1 wagon's worth of material every 7 seconds from build to build, and I don't know, I just have trouble caring about that. Anyway, despite targeting 1 full unstacked belt's worth of science, I have to apologize here because I'll be carrying this science around with bots instead. You can make it work with belts, even with all 12 sciences, but it would be a royal pain to lay out in this block system and would also require about 50% more quality beacons and modules, so I'm not even going to attempt it. I want the actual landing pad on the other side of the block so I can easily belt calcite out and onto a train for transport to our copper and iron patches. There's just enough room for that, plus some active provider chests for anything we don't want clogging our landing pad inventory, like spoilage or that ammo we dropped down earlier. There's a few more odds and ends to take care of before we can call Novice ready to build. For example, some products are needed in quantities too small to justify their own block, but too large to cram into a bot mall. Thankfully, pretty much all those products are defense and nuclear related. So, introducing the bus block. That's where we cram a tiny main bus into its own block. First up is nuclear fuel cells and reprocessing. I'm ripping this one out of my 1.1 blueprints because it just hasn't changed. The fun feature is this little belt twist here, which causes the input inserter to prioritize the reprocessed U-238 from the far lane over the supplementary input from the near lane. We don't strictly need beacons for this one, but given our massive reactor demands, we'd be flying a little close to the sun without them, so better safe than sorry. Next is Spidertron rockets. Aside from the cryo plant for explosives, these look basically like they did the last time, so moving on. Then comes uranium ammo. We don't strictly need this, but I don't feel like relying entirely on lasers for defense, and flamethrower turrets chew up a surprising amount of processing power at megabase scale, so we won't be using those. Ammo has a wonderful crafting machine ratio, 1 yellow to 3 red to 10 green. Unfortunately, we don't have quite enough room in the block to maintain that lovely ratio, so we'll have to resort to something lesser. Last is artillery, because even if we clear out everything inside what will soon be a massive pollution cloud, enemy expansions are still on and behemoth worms could outrange anything else. We need 2 cryo plants making explosives here to keep up with the artillery assemblers, which takes up an annoying amount of room. But thankfully we're only putting beacons on one side of these builds, so it can spill out the other. We're also bringing calcite and tungsten plate in via bot, because we barely need any calcite, and I am not putting tungsten plate on a train just for this. Then we should probably deal with our actual defenses. That starts with this special rail extension that has branches for a defense train to stop, unload, and quickly turn back around. We can middle-click on train wagon slots and filter each one to a specific item so wagons can carry a mixed load. Then we have to unload only as many of those contents as we actually need. Each inserter in the defense unload stop is set to set filters and hooked up to a constant combinator, which sets both the items and their desired quantities. This arithmetic combinator then multiplies the actual logistic network contents by -1, which also gets hooked up to the inserters. This causes the filter signals to decrease as items are added to the network. When an item meets or exceeds the demand in the respective constant combinator, the filter disappears, preventing any more of that item from being unloaded. This other arithmetic combinator multiplies the network contents by -2, which gets added to the constants within the train stop. The stop is then set to enable if any signal is greater than 0. The result is that a train is called if any item quantity dips below half of what the constants demand, which prevents the train from continually being called and recalled as ammunition gets used in small bursts. The defense perimeter itself is pretty straightforward. On the functionally impossible chance that the biters ever actually break through, I'm putting substations every 9 tiles instead of every 18, so the loss of any one substation won't take down the power grid. Then I just mess around until I come up with an interesting looking pattern that aligns with the substations, and we're basically done. And of course we can't forget the resource patches themselves. Because Big Miner's effective area extends well past their footprint, we have room to put beacons between tileable pairs of miners and foundries. Okay, Novice just needs one more thing, and that is, the entire planet of Vulcanus. Yeah, all that calcite for the molten ores has to come from somewhere. We'll again start with the botmol, but we can get a leg up here and use the novice botmol as a template before just deleting everything we don't want to make on Vulcanus. Defenses, nuclear, things like that. Then we add a few things we weren't making on novice, like foundation. We don't need sulfur or batteries here outside of a mall context, so instead of making dedicated blocks for those, we'll make them directly in the mall. That means we need to bring in petroleum and acid trains, then tack on a condensation plant to the latter to get local water. Routing all the new pipes isn't hard to do, just hard to do aesthetically. We can't forget to make belts here, so we'll put belt foundries where the EM plants used to go to minimize bot travel time to the gear stop. We also can't forget the landing pad. That should be bundled into the malls on planets other than Novice, since there's no science block anywhere else. Similar to sulfur and batteries, we barely need any plastic here on Vulcanus, so we're going to make it locally wherever we need it. That means a coal stop and a petroleum stop for these red circuits. This build will still send a combined input belt down the middle, but this time it'll be plastic and wire because I have plans for these green circuits. After directing the red circuits to the outermost belts, we can feed both circuits past this sulfuric acid stop, and magically we have everything we need for blue circuits. That will use exactly the same design as the novice version, just less of it. Then we continue to feed the red circuits forward and cap off this combo block with load stations for both red and blue circuits. We also need to quickly redo low-density structures to use locally made plastic. Routing 3 different fluids in a space-constrained environment was a tad annoying, but otherwise it follows the same principles as the novice LDS block, so let's move on to oil. I promised you a proper liquefaction build after all. Let's get crackin'. Get it? Because there's oil crack. Whereas liquefaction on Novice gives you water for cracking and asks that you boil it to get steam for liquefying, Volcanus gives you the steam and asks that you condense it to get the water. We're still aiming to make this build tileable, so I figured the best solution to the water problem was to bundle a condensing plant into every tile. That makes for a lot of pipes to juggle, and I had to go through several attempts that just plain didn't work. After plenty of experimentation, I settle on this solution: one stage for the refinery and steam condensation, and a second stage for the cracking. The latter has some truly ugly piping, but at least the beacons are nicely aligned. After shoving the tiles in a block, we'll set up the first 2 train stations to be acid and calcite to make our steam. There wasn't enough room in the tile for lubricant plants, so we have to stick those at the end of the build. Almost forgot the circuitry. This is a bit different than Novice's oil processing, because heavy oil cracking produces more light oil per craft than liquefaction does, so we're monitoring the heavy oil cracking instead of the liquefaction. I probably didn't need to change that, but I did anyway. We're only making 1 petroleum load station since we produce and need so little on Volcanus. Really what we're aiming for here is a boatload of light oil, because we need a boatload of rocket fuel for our boatload of rockets. Then of course we need the Volcanus-specific resources. Tungsten plate is honestly pretty boring, just ore and molten iron in to get plate out. Hot power grid though. We're aiming for 20 per second over our science target, so we always have some extra for the mall and for export. Tungsten carbide has the same target, 20 per second over our science needs. That much carbide makes for a hungry block, so we're starting with 2 stops for acid, 2 for coal, and 3 for tungsten ore. It takes a while of messing around with beacons before finally landing on a good ratio. Routing coal in, carbon out, and ore past is a bit tricky with the size of these cryoplants, but then I realize I can take a page from the yellow science design, using a filter splitter to switch coal and carbon while leaving the ore in place. Acid routing is made easier by not pushing it through the front of the production rows, instead running a single pipeline below them and then sending it across rows, one to the next. Then I remembered I was trying to design our builds with beacons down the middle where possible, so here's an alternative design that direct inserts carbon. Don't know which one I'm going to use yet, but I'll stick both of them in the blueprint book. We can't hit our exact SPM target here, probably owing to the crafting speed and productivity bonuses that foundries carry, but it's still an easy enough build. Then we just put the science on a train and carry it off to the... Wait a minute. We're not consuming any science on this planet, we're just shipping it off. So where do I think I'm taking it? Let's just put rocket silos directly on the end of the production rows and stick rocket ingredient unload stations on the other side. We'll need about 1 rocket every 15 seconds just for the science, but this should craft quickly enough. Actually, that doesn't quite cut it. I'm assuming maybe a 4-minute round trip between Novice and Volcanus, 5 at the worst. The cargo hauler will only be in orbit above Volcanus once during those 5 minutes, and if we don't want it to get stuck there, we need to launch all that science as quickly as possible. So we don't need 1 rocket every 15 seconds. We need 20 rockets once every 5 minutes. And the best way to achieve that isn't with faster crafting rockets, it's with more rockets. It's kind of amazing how little of this block is actually producing anything, and how much is just logistics infrastructure. Despite the solar being quite usable on Volcanus, we'd still need about 15,000 panels to cover our energy needs, so we'll handle most of it with steam power. Not all, though. If nothing else, the steam process still needs kickstarting. Owing to the day-night cycle being different on Volcanus than on Novice, the accumulator-to-solar ratio is only 72.6% here, down from Novice's slightly updated 84.7%. This design doesn't look the greatest, but it's a nearly perfect ratio for Volcanus, and has the added bonus of tiling between the rail network, so rails could be run through large solar fields. Could. We won't be doing that, though. Last but not least is the lava processing. This design sends bricks and stone forward to pickup stops, and then sends excess stone backward to the lava lakes only when the forward-flowing stone backs up. And that should be everything. Let's see how it all fares in the actual game, shall we? As mentioned, Novice won't be getting off the ground without calcite, so we'll tackle Volcanus first. And that starts with manifesting our destiny. Last time around, Demolisher territory was a royal pain to capture because the best DPS tech we had was a giant block of gun turrets. But now that we've made an off-screen visit to Aquilo to craft ourselves a handheld railgun,
It's free real estate.
it makes it sound like they're trying and failing to hold in a sneeze. Even the big ones go down in maybe 4 hits, and this is without any damage upgrades. 40 acres to call my own. We barely have any foundation right now, so in the interest of minimizing its use, we'll want to place our largest block, the Botmall, in an area totally clear of lava, which just so happens to be smack in the middle of our existing base. That means we have to tear this down before we can really begin. I don't want to waste this cold fluoroketone, but I don't have enough stone to make more foundation, so I have to set up a temporary lava processing build just for the stone byproduct. Now that that's dealt with, let's get pasting. This overlaps with our starting sulfur patch, but we'll just have to live with it, at least for now. Oh, right, power. Won't get far without raw materials either, so here's a lava processing spot. 1 station for stone, 1 for bricks, 1 for calcite, and 1 each for copper and iron. Unfortunately, to make more iron, we need to already have some iron to make supplies like storage tanks, so we have to scavenge some iron and steel from other requester chests. Well, we've recovered from a Roboport-induced blackout, and now we're merely browning out. If we're ever going to escape low-power purgatory, we could use more solar, which requires green circuits. So why don't we make that our next block? These blueprints deliberately don't include full horizontal rails, so there's room for other elevated 3-way intersections to, intersect. So we have to fill in the remaining rails with an extension blueprint. Okay, maybe building more production in the middle of a brownout was a bad idea. Here's a bespoke acid-to-steam build to stave off the darkness for a while. Literal darkness, not metaphorical. A growing factory is a wonderful thing, but take it from me, it doesn't compare to the right antidepressant. Here we have our first major alteration to the blueprint books. We don't need bricks anywhere except the mall on Volcanus, so why am I treating them like their own ingredient? It would make a lot more sense to just train in stone and smelt it into bricks on site next to the concrete production. Nothing says Factorio quite like running a train line straight through the corpses of your enemies. Like the orange science, we'll set up this calcite patch with 20 rocket silos on site. The math says I probably could have gotten away with 16, but a little excess infrastructure never hurt anyone. Except maybe Houston. We'll still need calcite locally, obviously, so this calcite load station will feature splitters that pass through some to the rockets. Second major change to the blueprints. Bulk inserters were mostly a silly idea. We don't need to worry about fully emptying our inserter hands anywhere except Gleba, so we might as well give ourselves maximum throughput everywhere else. Next, we could use some red and blue circuits, except, oops, we haven't imported any cryoplants to make plastic with. So I switched to building coal liquefaction, except we also don't have enough green belts. I guess we have to temporarily downgrade. I wondered why this wasn't working, only to realize it wasn't my fault. You see, underground paths can't cross through lava, which, fair enough. But when you paste a blueprint containing underground paths onto lava, the game doesn't automatically bridge those paths with foundation, meaning we now have to play a game of where's lava with basically every single tile of this massive blueprint. Anyway, once we've done that and built up a bit of lubricant, we can finally make some new turbo belts. This sulfuric acid patch doesn't have amazing yield, but if we want cliff explosives or rail ramps, we need acid to make water, so here's a temporary acid load stop. These particular cliffs aren't exactly in my way, but blowing them up makes me feel more in control. We're out of turbo belts again. This time it's a lack of tungsten plate, so let's make that block next. Thankfully, we've scavenged plenty of tungsten ore from demolisher corpses and random rocks, so we don't have to stake out a tungsten patch before we can make at least some new plate. I'm getting a bit sick of building all these blocks myself, so let's steal what red circuits we've made so far and get a jump start on making new roboports and substations. Our starter coal patch is right in the middle of some prime lava-free real estate, so let's try to drain it. Can't run from tungsten patches forever. It mines incredibly slowly, so we'll speed it up with both beacons and native modules. Might as well put all that tungsten to good use. I decided to use the carbide block design with fewer beacons. I'm starting to get sick of these power problems. We could cover the world in solar, but what's the fun in that when you can make boiled water by the gigawatt? Our power needs are in the multiple gigawatts, however, so let's delete our beacons to give ourselves some momentary relief. We probably have enough headroom now to put down the low-density structure block. Still no cryoplants, though. 1.5 gigawatts of power straight from Steam. That means this crappy temporary build can finally go away. Okay, I was hoping to play this save without any mods, but I forgot about a feature I despise that we simply haven't encountered before now. By default, placing a tile of concrete only has a chance to remove any ground decorations beneath it. Grasses, fungi,
Very small rocks.
that sort of thing. So I'm installing a mod called Realistic Decoration Cleanup, which increases that removal chance to 100%. Because even the tiniest trace of the natural world poking through simply ruins the look of a proper factory floor. You can see here how the concrete designs have also been made modular, so a few blueprints can cover any size and arrangement of these variable length blocks. You know how I mentioned earlier that I was going to replace the brick train with on-site brick smelting? Well, if we want any more concrete, I might want to actually follow through on that thought. All these pretty blocks don't mean much if we have nothing to feed them with, so let's go secure some resources. This acid patch has 40,000 something % yield, which, seems good enough. Thanks to the magic of offshore pumps, we can draw our monstrous copper supply from literally any lava patch. This lake should do nicely. This calcite 4:1 belt output doesn't merge correctly into a full belt because I wasn't paying attention when I flipped it, but our calcite throughput needs are so low that it just doesn't matter. Really, I'm only mentioning this so you know that I know that yes, it's technically wrong. Then we have a power crash because 4 acid trains created a deadlock by the steam block. Hopefully this added rail signal will keep it from jamming again.
20 minutes later.
Nope, guess not. It's like all these trains are trying to enter the same... Oh! Ugh. Third major change from our blueprints then. Every station needs to be set to limit 1, so multiple trains don't try to enter the same open station. Otherwise, you get fun deadlocks like this 7-train copper pileup by the low-density structures. Hey, that coal patch from earlier is finally dry. We even got another in-game achievement for it since we're using mods now. Finding a place for the massive orange science block isn't hard. Finding a place for it that minimizes foundation usage, however, is more than a little annoying. Eventually, I decided to move this intersection closer to the calcite patch and drop the science on the right. It's not ideal, but it's the best we can do. Speaking of foundation, I wondered why we're apparently dry on lithium plate from Aquilo, only to discover I forgot to set a limit on those cryoplants we needed earlier, and they've been eating all the blue circuits that we needed to make rockets. Our power is finally strong and stable enough to justify putting our beacons back. And speaking of beacons, this seems like a good time to start grinding quality beacons for our labs on Novice. Well, there's not much to do here now but wait for foundation. Why don't we just let this run overnight?
The next morning.
Alright, looks like everything is done, 221 foundation in the bank, and... what in the gleba happened here? How does this cargo hauler have no repair packs? Has it really not been back to Novice even once? Okay, if I don't want to lose this, I have to reload and change its interrupt condition to also go back to Novice if it's missing repair packs. And speaking of novice, I don't want to get caught there without enough supplies the same way I almost tripped myself up on Vulcanus, so let's start making mountains of everything we know we'll need. Even with 4 speed modules and 5 speed beacons apiece, the calculator tells me we'll need at least 85 miners to sustain our tungsten supply. Yes, this massive river of stacked tungsten ore still isn't enough to reach our science target. This ought to do it, though. A bit more concreting and we're pretty much done here. Now that's what I call a base. Alright, let's get out of here and tackle the big one. Where did all our science go? Where did all our everything go? Do we really have no more copper? Yep, that is exactly what happened. I guess it's a good thing we're here now. We still have a bit of copper right by the base that we didn't fully drain yet, so why don't we use that to supplement ourselves while we're still building up our supply cache for the new base? Don't think I've ever been jump scared by achievements before. Let's use the power of our mech suit to plot out this lake to our west. Looks like we have a nice defensible northwestern border, once we clear out the local wildlife. Ah, that's more like it. Time to head over and build the wall. On second thought, let's clear out a bit extra. I want that copper patch. Looking good. We'll let defense trains bring uranium ammo and maintain the wall sometime later. For now, they can get a few hand-fed robots with repair packs and a box of supplies. Then we repeat for the south and east. And just to be safe, let's make sure I didn't miss any expansion parties while I was repairing and restocking ammo back at base. Let's also be smarter here than we were on Vulcanus and start with power. When using a block system, it's still functionally necessary to paste fission reactors over lakes. At least you don't have to integrate landfill into the blueprint anymore. Said landfill is somewhat limited right now, so once we've filled in enough space for half a reactor, we'll use the rest for production blocks. By the way, fourth major change to the blueprints. I decided to revisit Novice's sulfur/acid block and battery block, opting to combine them into a single super combo block. With careful use of a single chained load station for the acid, we can feed it forward to the battery section without risk of draining the acid stop while it's in use. It feels so nice to have competent interplanetary logistics infrastructure. The malls and reactors are going up fairly quickly thanks to all that resource hoarding we did. We even got an achievement for using nuclear power. Apparently, the reactors that were already running when we started installing mods just don't count. We are starting to run short on red circuits, as is tradition, and so we're running short on roboports as well. I have to steal some roboports that the bots placed and manually place them back down elsewhere, just so the bots can resupply the reactors. Next, I have to put myself on a watch list by stealing some uranium. Now that the network-based bots have reactor power, they can take over most of the construction for us. Not everything, though. I haven't moved the landing pad just yet, so our personal bots have to take care of most of the greenbelt and stack inserter work. Time to tear down the old mall and trash its contents into the new mall. You can catch some glimpses of bots dumping items into the appropriately filtered storage boxes, just like we planned. If we want more red circuits, we'll need oil, so that can go next to the labs. Anyone else enjoy just sitting back and watching bot swarms? Now that we have moved the landing pad, it's time to turn our destination novice supplies back on. I hoarded too much iron and not enough steel or gears, so let's use the quality area for some quick iron repurposing. I don't want to let this stone patch go to waste just because it's in our way, so we'll try draining it to make our landfill and rails. I wondered why we weren't getting any calcite from Vulcanus, only to discover that the relevant hauler got a couple cargo bays obliterated by a rogue asteroid. That wouldn't be a problem if Vulcanus was making spare cargo bays, or if the hauler wasn't set to request construction materials, or if it wasn't also set to not leave Volcanus until all requests were satisfied. But here we are. Let's take a look at what we're missing to decide what to prioritize making next. Wait, prod 3s? I was trying to avoid those. What did I screw up? It's probably the labs, isn't it? I would have sworn I designed those with prod 2s. Does that mean I screwed up the consumption speed calculations? Why doesn't that say 1 point something? At first I thought I had a bugged version of Rate Calculator, but the truth is even more annoying. Science Pack consumption rate depends on this research timer. I was using mining productivity to make some calculations and research productivity to make others. And it turns out research productivity is the only infinite research in the game that clocks in at 120 seconds per science pack instead of the typical 60. Which means if I ever want to hit 3600 Promethium science per minute, I have to completely redo the block to account for needing about twice as many labs as I thought. Well, the good news is that after plenty of beacon tweaking, I can get the labs to consume an exact quantity of science now. The cargo bay layout is much more aesthetically pleasing too. The bad news is that this massive oil block no longer fits next to the labs, so I have to rip up this entire thing and place it down again somewhere else. Thank the devs for removable landfill. It's a nice touch how the dust that the miners kick up is keyed to the color of the ore being mined. Hey, here's a hot uranium processing tip. Don't be an idiot and use stack inserters for centrifuge products. When dealing with any process that can give multiple outputs, you always need to be able to fully empty your inserter hand of one item so the crafting machine doesn't get internally clogged on a different item. I'm getting a little annoyed at how long our speed modules are taking to craft, so let's import a bunch from Volcanus just to hurry the process along. Next, if we're going to make concrete, or, black and purple sciences, we're going to need bricks, so let's turn this stone patch into a dedicated brick stop. Bricks require furnaces, and while I could use an old design for this, I'd rather make a new furnace design that can take in a fully stacked green belt of stone and uses Tier 2 productivity modules. We don't have those modules yet, nor beacons, but this should at least get us moving. Might as well set up our shiny new defense train on at least one stretch of border. The lasers take care of the bulk of the angry natives. Really, the gun turrets are just there to show off a bit. We're not getting uranium as fast as I'd like, so let's add a few of our precious speed beacons to the centrifuges. Okay, can't run from biter eggs forever. They're an ingredient in biolabs, and we need more of those. Thankfully, I don't have to automate the whole process just yet. Hand-feeding bioflux to this previously captured nest that I left alive and running the eggs back to the mall myself will do the job for now. This seems like a good opportunity to test out whether my egg control circuitry actually works. And yeah, seems like it does. While I'm thinking about it anyway, why don't we make some legendary Tier 2 productivity modules for our labs? Quality doesn't affect the speed penalty, but it does affect the productivity bonus. 50% higher than a common quality Tier 3 prod mod. Alright, we're starting to push the limits of 24 reactors worth of power. Time to double it. 2,000 construction bots strong and counting. We have to be careful setting a buffer size for the science unload stations. Too low and the buffer could run out before the next train arrives, obviously, but too high is also problematic because the bots aren't guaranteed to take from each wagon's chests equally. I think 10k is about as high as I can safely set it. Offshore pumps will continue to work if you landfill or otherwise pave over their water area after you initially set them, but I've never liked the look of that. So this special deconstructor will let me cancel setting landfill and concrete on those areas, preserving the look. I wondered why this coal train was stuck at a totally full unload stop in the plastic block before finally noticing that the train station was missing a circuit wire. This base has taken a long time to create, and we're not consuming any products except at the mall, so now our item buffers are starting to fill up. Black Science is lagging behind though, because it seems like one coal unload station isn't enough to keep up with demand. A quick bit of math says it would need a train coming in about every 31 seconds, which, yeah, seems pretty unrealistic. I forgot to record myself actually making the change, but we can fix that problem by moving the production areas around a bit and using the space to fit a second coal unload stop. I also forgot to record myself changing the low-density structure build to use a prettier power pole layout. I was in the lab anyway, and the old wiring was messy enough to bother me. Anyway, let's paste the updated Black Science design over the old one. We're also about to actually turn this base on and do some research, so let's double our power production again. Why aren't we getting any electromagnetic plants for this red circuit block? Because Fulgora is clogged on low-density structures. I just can't escape the trash planet. The stone patch right next to our base has finally shrunk enough that we can fit the green science block beneath it. And with that, we're ready to take this base for a test spin. The most rigorous research we can do with just the novice-specific sciences is mining productivity, which only uses 4 of the 6. But mining productivity is amazing, so I'm not complaining. I might have underestimated the size of the bot swarm needed to handle this much science. As huge as that bot swarm is, though, it's still not enough to deliver as much science as we need as quickly as we need it. The labs should be consuming at 7.2k science per minute, but instead they're hovering a bit below 4. Let's start shoring this up by adding more roboports around the labs, so bots don't have to make long trips away from the block to recharge. Okay, Purple Science has run down its buffer, and now its production is lagging because it needs more stone the same way Black Science needed more coal. Thankfully, the solution is the same: make room for another stone stop. But it's still lagging a bit, and Rate Calculator tells me it's because we're not making enough steel, which I swore I had enough of. Eventually, I remembered that steel productivity is a research that exists, and we hadn't yet hit the level 5 I was assuming when I designed these blocks. I wonder how fast we can research every braking force upgrade. "12 seconds. I love it. Okay, we're still not getting science to the labs as quickly as we need to. Let's triple the number of requested packs per chest and see if that does it. Now there's the consumption rate I was looking for. Let's research mining productivity up to, say, level 69, and then try out some research that requires orange science too. The most rigorous infinite research we can do right now is LDS productivity, so unfortunately we still won't actually be using yellow or black science this video. Hey, that stone patch is finally drained. Let's paste a second LDS block in its place. We probably don't actually need it thanks to the productivity research we're doing, and we definitely don't need it now because we're not consuming yellow science, but here it is anyway. Okay, Purple Science is falling behind again. This time, however, it's because of a general lack of calcite. What's going on with our cargo hauler? Looks like it's still working, but you know how earlier I assumed a worst-case round-trip time of 5 minutes? Well, you know what happens when you assume. Turns out regenerating all its water puts the actual round-trip time a bit over 7 minutes, so we're not moving enough calcite per trip. Guess it's time to double our cargo capacity. In fact, let's be super safe and estimate a 10-minute round trip, which means we'll haul 36,000 science and, I don't know, maybe 20,000 calcite. No idea if I actually have enough storage space for that much stuff, but one way to find out. Ha! Nope. Thankfully, once we're back at Novice and dropping supplies, the mess magically cleans itself up. I guess we should double the cargo capacity again. There, that ought to do it. Now that is a thing of beauty. We're requesting enough science now that the bottleneck on trip time is science production rather than water production. Turns out using science as the bottleneck is a great way to ensure science throughput is as high as it can be. Even with the added weight of the new cargo bays, we're still moving as fast as ever. There's that ship width calculation for you. Like manna from heaven. After letting it run for another hour to make sure there weren't any lingering issues, it's time for some stats. Production of all 5 relevant sciences is rock steady at 3.6k science per minute. Consumption oscillates between twice that and 0 now that the buffers are drained, but it still averages the same 3.6k that I was shooting for. Good job, me. And with that thrilling, graph, it's time to close us out. I know we only got to 7 of the 12 sciences and only showed 5 of them doing anything, but did you see the length of this video? This took me almost 2 months to make, so please have mercy. This will be a part 1 of 2. I promise we'll get to the rest. Now, for the first time, I'd like to thank my financial backers. These are the fine, patient, and generous folk who enjoy my fledgling channel enough to fund these videos directly. Let me tell you, there's perhaps nothing better for motivation than knowing that someone out there likes your work that much. So if you liked this video, why not join us via either Patreon or YouTube memberships? You can get private Discord access, early video releases, blueprints, save games, and more. Just, if you do join and download this save, maybe don't look too closely at the state I left Gleba in. As always, thank you so much for watching. I hope to see you again next time. Can't even do a make the biters pay for it joke, it's too depressing.